Welcome to lesson 13 of Immanuel called the Vineyard. And so this lesson, another really good lesson. I mean, all these parables have been really good for understanding our behavior between the accepting this forgiveness and our behavior and our responsibility and our duty between now and his second coming, or unless death comes first, but just our behavior during this time period in general, right? Now, the vineyard parable is said after this conversation. So we're going to read this conversation about the disciples' reward, which is not a foreign conversation to this class at all. We've already talked about um, this conversation in particular. But it's interesting that one thing I have enjoyed as I've been doing this with you guys is going back and looking at all the parables as they coincide with the conversations that he is telling them in. He tells this parable of the vineyard worker after he talks to the young man, tells him he should sell his possessions and give to the poor and follow him. He says it's easier for Kim to go through a needle than for a rich man to go to heaven. Peter says, and then now we're in the conversation with Peter, we're in the other disciples, where Peter says, we've given up everything. So let's go ahead and read it. It says, then Peter said to him, behold, we have left everything and followed you. What then will there be for us? And Jesus said to them, truly I say to you that you who have followed me in the regeneration, when the Son of Man will sit on his glorious throne, you also shall sit upon 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And everyone who has left houses, or brothers, or sisters, or father, or mother, or children, or farms for my name's sake will receive many times as much, and will inherit eternal life. But many who are first will be last, and the last first. So he goes in and telling them that you who have followed me in the regeneration when Son of Man sits on his glory throne, you shall sit upon 12 thrones. We tells them something very specific to them, that listen, you guys will sit on 12 thrones judging Israel. We've already talked about this in this class. We know where their judgment lies in that first resurrection with the remnant of Israel. Then it goes and tells them this is what everyone will be rewarded. You as well, but also the people that you're judging. It says, but many who are first will be last, and the last first. Now, after this, the next chapter, he says, for the kingdom. So, because it says for the kingdom of heaven is like, this is a continuing conversation, a continuing teaching. And I think sometimes when we read these things in a book, we don't understand that it's not just a random recording of, okay, oh, then like maybe 3 days, a week later, whatever it is, that now we're recording this next parable that he speaks. No, this is one conversation. This is one conversation. So after he tells them that, he says, for the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. When he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius for the day, he sent them into his vineyard, and he went out about the third hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And to those he said, you also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right I will give you. And so they went. Now, once again, this is a parable. So when he says it's like, obviously this is not what it is. It is a representation of what it is in spirit. The landowner is him. He went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. I would liken that to the 12 disciples. When he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius for the day, he sent them into the vineyard. I would, he sent the disciples out, right? And he made an agreement with them, just like he just did a second ago. This is the reward, okay? And he went out about the third hour and saw others standing idle in the workplace. So then this is when he went out later, and comes back, and this could be by the Spirit of Christ, going through the earth through faith and being passed around. He goes out, he sees others standing around idle. They're not doing anything, nothing. So he says, listen, you also go into the vineyard. Whatever is right, I will give you. And so they went, and he hired more workers. He agrees with them that whatever is right, I will give you. Now let's get into some Greek insights. It says, the first one, so it's rendered landowner. The compound noun fuses oikos which is household, and despotes, sorry, lord master, designating someone who holds sovereign authority over an entire domestic domain and all who belong to it. Matthew um, uses landowner as a consistent image for God throughout his gospel. And a first century audience would have recognized the pattern immediately, rendering it landowner reduces the master to a business figure conducting a labor transaction. The original word places him in the role of a lord over a household, which is precisely the theological portrait Jesus is building. The parable is not about wage law; it's about the nature of the one doing the hiring. And so, once again, we see this is not just about a businessman, or we're not just likening God to this businessman. We're likening him to a head of a household, which we know, um, like Jesus said, there's many rooms in God's house, in God's household. He's the head of a household. In Heaven Jerusalem, he is the head of that household. Get God, Christ, man, woman. He's the head of the household. I think we understand that, right? Next one, in Matthew 20 verse 1. So 4, which is what I started with talking about. This small conjunction of explanations, the grammatical hinge, connecting the parable to Jesus' closing statement in Matthew 19:30, where he declares that the first will be last and the last first. The guard signals that what follows is not a new topic, but the explanatory ground for that principle. Without recognizing this connective force, a reader may treat the parable as a freestanding story about generosity in the workplace. With it, the parable is inseparable from a direct challenge to the disciples' assumptions about status, reward, and who gets what in the kingdom. The entire interpretation shifts depending on whether one reads the parable as illustration or as argument. Okay, we just talked about that, so I'm not going to go any more into that. Next one is rendered as right. When the master hires the later workers without naming a wage, he promised to give them whatever is just. The adjective is the standard Greek term for justice and righteousness, carrying full moral and legal weight. This single word creates a pivotal contrast with the first group's contract. The early workers locked in a negotiated rate. Everyone else receives nothing but the master's character as their guarantee. The parable thus sets legal entitlement against trusting the master's righteousness, and the workers who hold a contract are the ones who ultimately complain. It is those who trusted the master's um, righteous nature, who receive without dispute. So, which is something that you notice in this parable, that the first people, they got this direct, and this is very good because this is really how it is, right? Is that we see the disciples, they're getting these direct promises, these direct wages, these direct rewards. He's telling them, you're gonna sit on 12 thrones. Everyone who's left behind these things will get more of these things. We didn't hear that face to face. He didn't tell us that. I mean, it's clear in this word of God that he'll reward us, but he didn't say any of these things that he said to the disciples in detail. So we are those that are entrusting God's character and that he's a rewarder for those who seek him and all those different things. We're trusting those things. We're trusting his character. Next part, again, he went out at about the sixth and the ninth hour and he did the same thing. If you haven't noticed yet, where he's these are watches that he's saying he's going out. Okay. He went about the sixth and the ninth hour and did the same thing. And about the 11th hour, he went out and found others standing around. He said to them, why have you been standing here idle all day long? They said to him, because no one hired us. He said to them, you go into the vineyard too. When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, call the laborers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last group to the first. We get into the Greek insights. So it says it renders it idle. This adjective is a compound of the negating prefix and work, literally meaning without work. It does not describe laziness or unwillingness. It describes a condition of having no work available. The workers standing in the marketplace are not loafers. They are the overlooked, the ones no one came for until late in the day. This distinction is morally critical to the parable. The latecomers are not rewarded despite bad character, but are the marginalized whom the world system passed by. Reading idle as a character flaw fundamentally misreads who these workers are and why the master's equal payment to them carries such theological force. So, so we do have to understand that they're not idle by choice. This is not lazy. Like this is not the same thing. The wicked and lazy slave. That's not them. They just weren't given anything to do. They didn't have anything to do. They've been passed by. Others were chosen first to be workers. I mean, you can kind of count it, look at it like Paul, who was chosen much later than the rest of the disciples to do the work of God. Okay, let's keep it going. So, next section it says, when those hired about the 11th hour came, each one received a denarius. When those hired first came, they thought that they would receive more, but each of them also received a denarius when they received it. They grumbled at the landowner, saying, "These last men have worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden in the scorching heat of the day." Let's look at the Greek inside because I wanna keep reading before I talk about it. Okay, so it says, "Grumble." The imperfect form indicates continuous repeated grumbling rather than a single outburst. More significantly, this is the precise verb used in the Septuagint. I'm getting better at that word. The Greek translation of the Old Testament for Israel's murmuring against God in the wilderness. Matthew's audience, steeped in the scriptures, would have heard the allusion unmistakably. The grumbling workers are placed in the typological role of Israel complaining against the Lord after he had provided for them. The complaint is not merely a labor dispute, it is covenant rebellion dressed in economic language, and the echo deepens the parable's indictment considerably. So we do have those, and we see the connection between Israel and those who grumble, but these are the first workers are grumbling. They're upset, and it's continued. It's not just one complaint; it's a continued, um, almost jealousy and comparison that cause them to grumble about that. Why are you making them equal to us? And we'll talk about this in a second. And this is a great parable for us who have come much later, right? Because what is it, 2026? And Jesus was around with his disciples, what, around 30 AD? And there have been many workers between now and then. And this is a mistake that many people make, and even in their own hearts, is you think that who came before is greater than who came later, and that's just not true. It's not true. Let's read the next part and then we get to it. But the answer said to one of them, "Friend, I'm doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for denarius? Then take what is yours and go. But I wish to give to this last man the same as to you. Is it not lawful for me to do what I wish with what is my own? Or is your eye envious because I am generous? So the last shall be first and the first last." So once again, this wraps it up. That understanding this, what he is telling his disciples is that, listen, you guys are first. I gave you a specific reward. You hear me? I told you about a specific reward. We agreed on it. You loved it. But because you were first, and although you guys are not going to live forever, but the work keeps working because their work is still working, right? We're still reading their letters. We're still um, products of the work of God that apostles did. True, very true. Though you are first, your work has worked the longest. You have probably produced the most out of all these people because you've worked the longest. It does not make you greater than the people I hire last. And this is where, although we are those who are trusting God's character for those rewards, this is where we actually do get a kind of concrete guarantee to him that what I told my disciples, what I offered them is also what I offer you. You're not going to they're not you're not getting anything different than what they get. So what does this do for us? This opens up our hearts, open up our minds to reality of that when we read this Bible and we read all these promises to his disciples that he tells them, they also apply to us. they also apply to us. But it's so important that none of us ever have an envious eye that God wants to do for someone else what he does for us. And this is where we're kind of transitioning because we're getting closer to the last class, which is called the bride, and we're gonna have many conversations like that because it's like being a wife to a husband, a generous husband that has other brides that does the same thing for them that he does for you. And just because you've had a longer relationship does not mean that he's going to do more for you than he's doing for someone who just started with him. And he is righteous and holy. No, I do love this when you connect it with the rewards and everything he told his disciples because we're coming to understand that he does not hold them higher. He did tell them he would give them 12 thrones to judge Israel. But even as judges, and they do have a specific role, and people can have roles without being held higher per se, right? So they have a this specific role of judging the 12 tribes of Israel. But he's also telling them that listen, that doesn't mean that you're greater than the people I hire later. And actually, he wraps it up by saying, so the last shall be first. So the people I hire later will be the greatest. And people I hire first will be the last. And this actually is very interesting because I'm trying to tell you, maybe people understand that a lot of things that Jesus said slapped a lot of people in the face. And it wasn't just the Pharisees and the Sadducees. His own disciples, he slapped in the face a little bit with this one. And I'm telling you, yeah, I love you, but technically, by what I'm saying in this parable, you're last, and the people I hire last will be first. And I do want to go. Let me go on one more thing about this before I read the Greek insights, which might hit many more things or the same things that I just said. But I think the first and last aspect does not really have to. I was just have to do with reward, but character, because the temptation that the first had was that they became grumblers like those of Israel, and they were envious. They had an envious eye on what he was doing with the people that came later. So morally, they were last. And morally, those who received with gratitude and with joy in whatever he gave them were first. Okay, some Greek insights will be done for the day here. It says agreed slash agree. The root gives English the word symphony and carries a sense of two parties sounding together in formal accord. In verse 2 describes the binding contractual agreement made with the first workers. In verse 13, the master returns to this same verb as the ground of his defense. You symphonize with me for a denarius, and a denarius you receive. The verb's recurrence creates a legal bracket around the complaint. Theologically, the workers who grumble are not victims of injustice. They receive exactly what was covenanted. Every subsequent group hired notably received no contract, only the master's promise of what is just. The contrast between legal agreement and personal trust is woven into the grammar itself and is nearly invisible in English. And how do I say this? This also goes to show just about like relationship with God. Like it can't be about what's on paper. It's about trusting who He is. It's about trusting who He is, and we have to be people who believe that no matter what we see, And this is the like I said, this is such a transition into our last class with the bride. This is what a bride should be like to her husband. You have to trust, no matter what you see, that he's doing right for the household. He's doing right for me. He's doing right for the household. That he's doing the right thing. Like it says in Proverbs about the excellent wife is that she trusts that her future is good, that there's nothing bad happening to her. We have to trust that when it comes to God, his leadership, and what he chooses to do. Next thing that it says friend. The word is consistently translated friend in English, but it's not the warm relational term. Philos. It denotes a comparison or associate and carries a tone of formal, somewhat distanced address, often directed at someone whose conduct is being called into question. Matthew uses this precise word not in only two other places, 22:12, where the king addresses the man cast out for lacking a wedding garment, and 26:50, where Jesus addresses Judas at the moment of betrayal. In every Matthean instance, the address is polite in form but pointed in function, directed towards someone who has acted wrongly. The master is not warmly consoling the complaining worker, he is formally and firmly correcting him. So I think that says what it says. We'll just move on from there. Wish. When the master declares, I wish to give to this last one the same as to you, the verb meaning to will, wish, or desire occupies an emphatic position in the Greek sentence. The NESB 1995's wish is correct but can sound mild in English. In context, stilo is the language of sovereign unconditional desire. The master is not making a business judgment or correcting an accounting error. He is expressing the free exercise of his own will. This is the theological center of the passage. Equal payment to all is not a policy or a principle derived from fairness arguments. It flows directly from the master's character and his sovereign freedom to be generous with what is his. The parable stakes everything on who the master is, not on what the workers deserve. And so, once again, everything in God's kingdom is based on who He is. Like it's His joy, it's His peace. When it comes to these rewards, they're His rewards, and it says that He's saying it is in His free will desire. It's not about law. It's not about none of those things. This is His desire. It is His desire to give equally or have equal opportunity giving. That we have the same possibility of the same rewards that the disciples had in the very beginning. And I really believe that's really important as we read this Bible and we read the promises to the disciples and we read the rewards in Revelation 2 and 3 and that you have the same possibility of reception of these rewards. They're not just for those thousands of years ago. It's his heart, it's his free will character to do the same for us. Next one says envious, with eye is bad note in margin. Literally translated, the phrase means evil eye, and it was a well-established Semitic and Jewish idiom for envy, stinginess, and resentment toward another's blessing. Its opposite, the good eye, signifies generosity. Jesus uses the same idiom in Matthew 6:22-23, where the eye functions as a lamp revealing the inner condition of the soul. The NSB 1995's envy has captured the intended meaning, but sacrifices the connection to Matthew 6 and a broader cultural texture. The contrast in verse 15 is structurally precise. The workers um, the worker's bad eye is set against the master's good and generosity. The parable diagnoses the complaint not as legal grievance, but as a spiritual condition, a soul disorder by comparison rather than oriented toward gratitude. So we just talked about this, man. It's just important we have hearts of gratitude for what he has promised us. And we shouldn't expect more because we've done more, because we've been doing things longer. We should expect the same reward. We're not, we are, we have to understand that we are collectively special. I don't want to say we're not special because we are special. Every disciple of Christ is special, but I'm not more special than the next disciple of Christ, and that disciple of Christ is not more special than me. No matter how many grapes they gather, no matter um, how long they've been gathering the grapes, it just doesn't matter. Last one, it says, NESB renders it last and first. The parable closes with deliberate Keyism, the last shall be first and the first last, which inverts the word order of Matthew 19:30, where Jesus said the first will be last and the last first. Both words are present throughout the parable structurally. The first hired, the last paid, the last hired, the first paid. The reversal at verse 16 is not incidental phrasing. It is a tight literary frame enclosing the parable and signaling that everything between 1930 and 2020 and 2016 is a single unified argument. Notably, verse 16 in NA 26 text drops the word many that appears in 1930, making the statement absolute rather than qualified. The the last and first, I'm sorry, the last and first are not merely narrative characters in a labor story. They are theological categories describing how God orders his kingdom in ways that consistently invert human calculations of merit and status. Amen. And so this was lesson 13, the Vineyard. We'll be back soon with our last lesson, Immanuel, lesson 14. Be blessed.